Welcome to another Christ Over Coffee. This is Pastor Chris Byers. I'm one of your hosts, and I'm glad to have you here. Christ Over Coffee is a great, wonderful weekly thing that I try and do, or at least whenever we do our Monday night Bible study. When we come together, we go through the Word of God, and then I come and recap what we did cover in class for those that aren't able to attend. If you're able to come and join us at St. John's Lutheran Church in beautiful Gila, Wisconsin, on Monday evenings from 6 till 7:30, we come together as a group. We talk about just reading the Word of God, talking about certain aspects. Now, we just have finished up through the 20th chapter of Exodus, and really what we're looking at, this is where God is kind of laying out the law, so to speak. He's giving the commandments, and now we're going to get more within the ordinances, the commandments, the law for the people of Israel. And it's a little bit thicker of an area to get into, but it's also very important. It also shows God's care for his people and how creation is. So here we're going to start out with the 21st chapter, and I am reading from the New American Standard Bible, 95 edition. It's a Keynote Study Bible I'm using. It's probably a little different than most of the translations that are out there. Normally we, as a church, we use the English Standard Version, but many are more familiar with the New International Version also, or some of the other ones that are out there. This one's a little headier, but it also helps us hear it a little differently and go through the Word. Now, beginning with the first verse. Now these are the ordinances which you are to set before them. If you buy a Hebrew slave, he shall serve for 6 years, but on the 7th he shall go out as a free man without payment. Now, when we're going here, we're studying or stepping into slavery, which this is a touchy subject because we have to understand that, yes, slavery is very common in there. I do have a note here or a little thing I want to go through that I have in my logos that I wanted to bring forward for us to use. And it just talks about slavery in the Bible. And one of the things here is this note from the Lutheran Study Bible note. It says, "The scriptures do not endorse or promote the practice of people holding other human beings as personal property. The Bible treats slavery in a negative light." Here, let me see if I can bring this over a little closer here. I know. Let's see here. All right. Into a negative light. Freedom through God's word. God's saving grace is a dominant theme in both testaments. Held captive for 430 years under the hand of a cruel oppressor, the Israelites cried to God for deliverance. God heard their cries and sent a leader, Moses, to aid in their release from Pharaoh, speaking to Moses from the burning bush. Now, I'm going to skip over that part here. I'm going to go where the Bible speaks of slavery continuing among God's people, who were themselves slaves for nearly 5 centuries. Slavery appears as a temporary allowance for human weakness rather than a perpetual God-given right. So as we read this, we want to see how slaves are going to be looked at or are being looked at differently from what we see within the world. Let's get back to my main screen here because I'm not going to go through the whole thing on that. But the reality of slavery, and we're going to find as we read each of these rules, each of these ordinances that God gives, is they're not being treated like the slaves, like they're not being treated like the Hebrews were treated in Egypt, or slaves that are other parts of other nations and people groups. There is a differentiation between the slavery in the Bible and the slavery we see, especially with our history here in the United States, negative history of slavery. There is a great difference on there, as opposed to looking at slaves as just chattel. There is a humanizing factor that is kept in here, and we're going to read that theme as we go on. Some people have a hard time with this section and this reality because they think just because it's in the Bible with ways in which they're be treated, it's a realization of, like many things in our world that we see today. As we were talking about sin and things like that in the group, there are many things that God desires for his people, but knowing the hearts and the spirits and the faithlessness that we tend to live under. These are God's chosen people. This is when they can see a physical presence of God in the pillar before them of fire and smoke. It's not hard here. This is also, they're at the mountain. They are hearing, they've seen, they've witnessed the rumblings. They've seen God there. They've heard the thunder boom as he spoke. They saw the lightning. They felt the earth shook. Yet here we know the failure of a heart that is not necessarily always turned toward God. The ultimate desire of God is to say, if you're going to live like other parts of the world, be aware of that you are going to be living differently. And the hope is, of course, with these things, you're going to find, same with divorce and the like, the Bible does address it. But we know that divorce is not something the Bible endorses. In all reality, slavery is not endorsed in Scripture, but it is, and it's not really blessed, but there's guidance given for what to do if one is caught or if they find themselves doing or practicing slavery. Here are the bare minimums that you must do on this. So, if he comes alone, he shall go out alone. If he is a husband of a wife, then his wife shall go out with him. So what was going on in this practice is many people were selling themselves. They would sometimes fall on hard times or have debt, so they would sell themselves into slavery for a period of time to be able to be freed from that debt. And if they were married, also, it was much better in the minds of people as saying, at least I can get regular meals and I can get regular, I can make sure that my wife, my spouse is taken care of. So here we find if his master gives him a wife and she bears him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall belong to her master, and he shall go out alone. So if you come with a wife, you leave with your wife. If you don't, if the master says, "Here, I have this slave woman, and I want you to be with her," well, then we have that slave woman that she will be able to be with her, and or the slave man, and they'll have children. Any children now? They are now part of the property of the slaveholder. So that's where we get that differentiation there. Because he has given her, the slave master has given him, the master has given the wife, so therefore the wife and the children belong to the master. But if the slave plainly says, "I love my master, my wife, and my children, I will not go out as a free man," then his master shall bring him to God. Then he shall bring him to the door or the doorpost, and his master shall pierce his ear with an awl, and he shall serve him permanently. So this was an ordinance saying, hey, if you want to stay, you got to make me a sign. It's not under coercion. You have to make this choice. Probably have to take him to a priest and say, hey, this is what we do. Go up in there, and they would do the awl. There's various understandings of this. It's really kind of an odd thing that we see. Why would somebody do that? But also understanding that maybe that's all they know. They don't want to go. They have nothing to move forward. They want to stay with their wife. They want to stay with their children. Their master is not a bad master. So they make choices, and they don't want to just be free and go out in the world, be on their own. So here's an option for them. Now this probably is was more of a practice of other areas, and God saying, okay, we'll have this practices. I'm sure that Moses was hearing judgments and stuff like this, so God was giving guidance, saying these are things that are going to happen. All right, this is what happens elsewhere, but it's going to be different with me, and it cannot be done under coercion, which I'm sure was probably an act of, that sometimes happened.
And if a man sells his daughter as a female slave, she is not to go as the male servants do, go free as the male servants do. If she is displeasing in the eyes of her master, who designated her for himself, he shall let her be redeemed. He does not have authority to sell her to a foreign people because of his unfairness to her. So the redemption would be as if there's a family member, a brother, a cousin, uncle, somebody in the family. They have the opportunity to redeem her, meaning they can pay the price, and that she would be go to them, and there she's just not going to be sent out into the world with destitute. And if he designates her for his son, he shall deal with her according to the custom of daughters. So he will. So if the son, if he gives him to his son, gives her to his son, and the son, now she is like a daughter or a daughter-in-law. She's one that is treated like family. If he takes to himself another woman, he may not reduce her food, her clothing, or her conjugal rights. So if he finds another wife that's a favorite wife, he can't just cast her out. He needs to make sure that he feeds her, gives her the same amount of food, can't starve her. She needs to be clothed, and she also needs to be satisfied sexually. So that way, he cannot hold her back or just hold her up into a place and just ignore her, forget about her. And if he will not do these three things for her, then she shall go out for nothing without payment of money. So she will then be free without having to pay for her freedom. She won't have to earn it. All right. So here we got those differentiations. Now we're going to move into other areas, ordinances too. He says, he who strikes a man so that he dies shall surely be put to death. But if he did not lie in wait for him, but God let him fall into his hand, then I will appoint you a place to which he may flee. If, however, a man acts presumptuously towards his neighbor, so as to kill him craftily, you are to take him even from my altar, that he may die. So here we have this. If you accidentally, in anger or whatever, you accidentally kill someone, you're not going to be treated like a murderer. But if you plan to do this, if you pre-planned it, you meant to bring harm or death to another, even if you go to the altar to offer a gift of atonement to God to say, hey, forgive me for my sin, you're still going to take him away, and he will pay for the murder. And he who strikes his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. So if you as an adult, young man, you're being disrespectful for your parents, you strike your father or your mother, if you can't respect the first authority God places above you, you probably aren't going to respect other authority. It's something that would be, if there's a little fear of death in some of the people today in our world, we might have a different world. We would probably have a greater amount of respect for those that God places in authority over us. All right. And he who kidnaps a man, whether he sells him or he is found in his possession, shall surely be put to death. And he who curses his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. And if men have a quarrel, and one strikes the other with a stone or with his fist, and he does not die but remains in bed, if he gets up and walks around on his staff, then he who struck him shall go unpunished. He shall only pay for his loss of time, and shall take care of him until he is completely healed. So if you get in a fight and you hurt someone severely, if they don't die, you don't have to pay for the killing of another. But you will have to make sure that you take care of them and compensate them for the lost time. But you will feel forgiveness there. If a man strikes his male or female slave with a rod, and he dies at his hand, he shall be punished. So they're not just your property to beat to death, like what would happen in other cultures. They're a man or a woman, and if you kill them, you will be punished for killing them as you would any other person. If, however, he survives a day or two, no vengeance shall be taken, for he is his property. Some would say money. His livelihood, those are those things. Honestly, you look at it as you don't tend to beat your things that are helping you make your living. You don't want to destroy those animals or humans in this case, but they do belong to you. And if men struggle with each other and strike a woman with a child so that she has a miscarriage, yet there is no further injury, he shall surely be fined as the woman's husband made a man of him, and he shall pay as the judges decide. But if there is any further injury, then you shall appoint as a penalty life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. So if you were to get into a fight, or if something happens, if there's physical harm to another, you are held accountable. If there's a miscarriage, there is an accountability for the baby that is inside the womb, for the mother and her husband, and you will need to compensate that. There will be some punishment that will be met. But if it's even worse, that there is more damage, you are held liable for everything. And if a man strikes the eye of his male or female slave and destroys it, he shall let him go free on account of his eye. So there, you cause one to lose an eye, then they are free. And if he knocks out a tooth of his male or female slave, he shall let him go free on account of his tooth. Loses even a tooth. And if an ox gores a man or a woman to death, the ox shall be stoned, and its flesh shall not be eaten. But the owner of the ox shall go unpunished. If, however, an ox was previously in the habit of goring, and its owner has been warned, yet he does not confine it, and it kills a man or a woman, the ox shall be stoned, and its owner also shall be put to death. If a ransom is demanded of him, then he shall give for the redemption of his life whatever is demanded of him. So, when we think about these things, we have to pay for what our animals do. We have to compensate. If you are negligent, there is further consequence. Whether it gores a son or a daughter, it should be done to him according to the same rule. If the ox gores a male or female slave, the owner shall give his or her master 30 shekels of silver, and the ox shall be stoned. And if a man opens a pit or digs a pit and does not cover it over, and an ox or a donkey falls into it, the owner of the pit shall make restitution. He shall give money to its owner, and the dead animal shall become his. And if one man's ox hurts another so that it dies, then he shall sell the live ox and divide its price equally, and they shall divide the dead ox. Or if it is known that the ox was previously in the habit of goring, yet its owner was not confined it, he shall surely pay ox for ox, and the dead animal shall become his. If a man steals an ox or sheep and slaughters it or sells it, he shall pay 5 oxen for the ox and 4 sheep for the sheep. So here is if you are to cattle rustling, basically. This is what they're talking about. If you're to steal another person's oxen or their lambs or sheep, you are liable, and here is the standard. But if the sun is risen on him, if the thief is caught while breaking in and is struck so that he dies, there will be no blood guiltiness on his account. So if you are defending your home from theft and you accidentally kill the thief, well, the blood's not on your hands. But if the sun is risen on him, there will be blood guiltiness on his account. He shall surely make restitution. If he owns nothing, then he shall be sold for his theft. So if he gets caught, there will be guilt on the thief, and you need to make sure that guilt falls. It doesn't excuse you to kill the thief for that, but he will make restitution in accordance with what he took. All right. So if what he stole is actually found alive in his possession, whether an ox or a donkey or a sheep, he shall pay double. So if it's found, you need to still pay. Even though everything is returned, you need to restore beyond what you planned on taking. So that's the punishment. If a man lets a field or vineyard be grazed bare and lets his animal loose so that it grazes in another's field, he shall make restitution from the best of his own field and the best of his own vineyard. So if you're not keeping good track of your animals, you're responsible for what they do. If a man if fire breaks out and spreads on to thorn bushes so that stacked grain or the standing grain or the field itself is consumed, he who started the fire shall surely make restitution. So if you commit arson or if you accidentally start a fire, you're responsible. All right. If a man gives his neighbor money or goods to keep for him, and it is stolen from the man's house, if the thief is caught, he shall pay double. If the thief is not caught, then the owner of the house shall appear before the judges to determine whether he laid his hands on his neighbor's property. So if they catch the thief pays the fine. If they don't catch the thief, then they need to make sure that the thief wasn't the other person that was given charge of the property. For every breach of trust, whether it is for ox, for donkey, for sheep, for clothing, or anything lost about which one says, "This is it," the case of both parties shall come before the judges, to whom the judges condemn shall pay double to his neighbor. If a man gives his neighbor a donkey, an ox, or a sheep, or any animal to keep for him, and it dies, or it is hurt, or is driven away, while no one is looking, an oath before the Lord shall be made by the two of them, that he has not laid hands on his neighbor's property, and its owner shall accept it and shall not make restitution. So if there's a definite accident and it's proven that there was it was an accident, something happened, then there's a simple settling of it, and accidents do happen. But if it is actually stolen from him, he shall make restitution to its owner. If it is all torn to pieces, let him bring it as evidence. He shall not make restitution for what has been torn to pieces. And if a man borrows anything from his neighbor, and it is injured or dies, while its owner is not with it, he shall make full restitution. If its owner is with it, he shall not make restitution. If it is hired, it came for its hire. So if you're there as the owner and something happens and you're with someone else, you're on that, they're using it and you're there, you're responsible as the owner. There is no restitution. If you've hired it, your restitution is the fee you were paid for what was hired out for your. And if a man seduces a virgin who is not engaged and lies with her, he must pay a dowry for her to be his wife. So that'd be a good idea. Right? Lay down with a virgin, you must marry her, right? If her father absolutely refuses to give her to him, he shall pay money equal to the dowry for virgins. You shall not allow a sorceress to live, or a witch, or anybody, or a medium. Those are some of the different terms that are used for that. But you're not allow them to live. That's not something we practice or should allow practicing, is what the law was. You'll be falsely guided. Whoever lies with an animal shall be put to death. He who sacrifices to any god other than the Lord alone shall be utterly destroyed. And you shall not wrong a stranger or oppress him, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. So you need to treat strangers well, and don't worship false gods. You shall not afflict any widow or orphan. If you afflict him at all, and if he does cry out to me, I will surely hear his cry, and my anger will be kindled, and I will kill you with the sword, and your wives shall become widows, and your children fatherless. So be well to widows and orphans. Treat them well. If you lend money to my people, to the poor among you, you are not to act as a creditor to him. You shall not charge him interest. Now, so I shared on there the irony of especially in Renaissance, the medieval times also. Many times the Jews were ghettoized. They were put in their own areas and weren't allowed to do as much. So oftentimes they became moneylenders to those that were non-Jewish. But they still didn't, and they would charge interest, but they would not charge interest to their own people. So that if there was one of their own in trouble, they would lend without interest. They would say, you pay me back when you have the money. If you take your neighbor's cloak as a pledge, you are to return it to him before the sun sets. For that is his only covering, it is his cloak for his body. What else shall he sleep in? And it shall come about that when he cries out to me, I will hear him, for I am gracious. You shall not curse God, nor curse a ruler of your people. You shall not delay the offering from your harvest and your vintage. The firstborn of your sons you shall give to me. You shall do the same with your oxen and with your sheep. It shall be with you, with its mother, 7 days. On the 8th day you shall give it to me, and you shall be holy men to me. Therefore you shall not eat any flesh torn to pieces in the field. You shall throw it to the dogs. So we're not to eat, you shouldn't eat roadkill, and stay holy. Be holy and clean. You're set apart. That's what God is telling the people of Israel. You are set apart. You are my people. You shall not bear false report. Do not, this is coming to judging and courts and things. You shall not bear false report. Do not join your hand with a wicked man. to be a malicious witness. So don't bear false witness. I mean, basically, don't make up false things. Don't tear people down. You shall not follow a multitude in doing evil, nor shall you testify in a dispute, so as to turn aside after a multitude in order to pervert justice. Nor shall you be partial to a poor man in his dispute. No partiality between rich or poor. You're going to say the facts. Be faithful to the facts. And don't let their status in the world affect justice, affect what you do. Justice is justice. If you meet your enemy's ox or his donkey wandering away, you shall surely return it to him. So if somebody is your enemy, even if you don't like them or they don't like you, you make sure that you return their animals to them if you find them. If you see the donkey of one who hates you lying helpless under its load, you shall refrain from leaving it to him. You shall surely release it to him. So if an animal, if they have a burden on them and they're down and they can't carry it, you are to help them on there. Even if they hate you, you still are helpful. You shall not pervert the justice due to your needy brother in his dispute. Keep far from a false charge, and do not kill the innocent or the righteous, for I will not acquit the guilty. And you shall not take a bribe, for a bribe blinds the clear-sighted and subverts the cause of the just. You shall not oppress a stranger, since you yourselves know the feelings of a stranger, for you also were strangers in the land of Egypt. So we are given great reminders of how we're supposed to treat each other and how we're not to allow certain things to get in the way of doing what we know is right, even if it may not be in our own best interest, right? And you shall sow your land for 6 years and gather in its yield. But on the 7th year you shall let it rest and lie fallow, so that the needy of your people may eat, and whatever they leave, the beast of the field may eat. You are to do the same with your vineyard and your olive grove. Now, this is a good practice that you'll see a lot in farming. It's not as formal as what they do here on the 7 years, but if even today you'll find that good farmers will rotate their crops. They will actually, and they'll leave one field. Often once a year they'll leave one field fallow to be able to restore it. The fields need to rest. Sometimes they'll plant something light in there that actually will help restore the soil. But like if you're growing a lot of corn and wheat, you do need to give your land a break because it will leach nutrients and minerals out of the soil. The same is true. I mean, especially like one of the worst things on the soil would be like tobacco. That actually really leaches out the soil. If you don't let your soil be restored, you're going to destroy it. It's not going to grow well in years to come. So you need to give it a rest. And 6 days you are to do work, and on the 7th day you shall cease from labor in order that your ox and your donkey may rest, and the son of your female slave as well as your stranger may refresh yourself. So take a rest. Don't work 7 days a week. You need to stop. You need to pause. You need to take a Sabbath. You need to set time apart to worship God, but also just to rest, so that way you don't burn out. Now, concerning everything which I have said to you, be on your guard, and do not mention the name of other gods, nor let them be heard from your mouth. So don't even let another god come from your lips. 3 times a year you shall celebrate a feast to me. You shall observe the feast of unleavened bread. For 7 days you are to eat unleavened bread, as I commanded you at the appointed time, in the month of Abib. For in it you came out of Egypt, and none shall appear before me empty-handed. So we remember the Passover. Also you shall observe the feast of the harvest of the first fruits from your labors which you sow in the field. Also the feast of the ingathering at the end of the year. So you first fruits, and also you're at the end of the year bringing in everything else. When you gather the fruit of your labors from the field. 3 times a year all your males shall appear before the Lord God. You shall not offer the blood of my sacrifice with leavened bread, nor is the fat of my feast to remain overnight until morning. You shall bring the choice first fruits of your soil into the house of the Lord your God. You are not to boil a kid in the milk of its mother. Now we move on, and we've gotten these ordinances, and we're going to continue to move on, as here's a blessing, a promise of what God is saying. But also there's a sign here. Behold, I am going to send an angel before you to guard you along the way, and to bring you into the place which I prepared you. So everything's going to be set. Be on your guard before him and obey his voice. So here is the command to the people of Israel. Do not be rebellious toward him, for he will not pardon your transgression, since my name is in him. All right. But if you will truly obey his voice and do all that I say, then I will be an enemy to your enemies and an adversary to your adversaries. For my angel will go before you and bring you into the land of the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, and I will completely destroy them. This is a promise here. As long as you obey, I will take care of all of your enemies. You shall not worship their gods, nor serve them, nor do according to their deeds, but you shall utterly overthrow them and break their sacred pillars in pieces. But you shall serve the Lord your God, and he will bless your bread and your water, and I will remove sickness from your midst. There shall be no miscarrying or barren in your land. I will fulfill the number of your days. I will send my terror ahead of you and throw into confusion all the people among whom you come, and I will make all your enemies turn their backs to you. And I will send hornets ahead of you, and that they may drive out the Hivites, the Canaanites, and the Hittites before you. I will not drive them out before you in a single year, that the land may not become desolate, and the beasts of the field become too numerous for you. I will drive them out before you little by little, until you become fruitful and take possession of the land. And I will fix your boundary from the Red Sea to the Sea of the Philistines, and from the wilderness to the river Euphrates. For I will deliver the inhabitants of the land into your hand, and you will drive them out before you. You shall make no covenant with them, nor with their gods. They shall not live in your land, lest they make you sin against me. And if you serve their gods, it will surely be a snare to you. What a great promise. All they had to do is be faithful. We know where they fall on this. We know Israel is nowhere near as big as what was promised here. Similar to the whole promise God gave in Egypt, it was like, no way, that's not going to happen, right? Makes no sense that the Egyptians you're going to plunder them, but the reality is they're going to give everything to you. You're going to walk out rich, and they're going to give you all that you want and send you out, and you will leave wealthy. No way would that happen, right? But it happened. Even though they witnessed this, all they had to do was trust that God was going to care for their food, he was going to care for their water, and he was going to make sure that all the enemies were cared for, that all they had to do, and they would never have a miscarriage, their wives would be fruitful, and they'd live long, healthy lives. They wouldn't get sick. So they'd be strong, they'd be healthy, they'd have many children, and they would continue. So as they would grow, God's plan was, I'm going to expand you, I'm going to help you take these territories as you grow. If you trust me, you will be very large, because we're looking, there's 600,000 men plus all the women and children. They're going to be even more. And as they grew, they would take more and more possession of it, and God would be before them. We know that that's not how it happens, because, of course, they don't trust in God in the same way. And the same is calling to us, is we need to trust in God as we remember his blessings and his promises, knowing he doesn't forget. He doesn't let go. He calls us to faithfulness. And Jesus Christ, the good blessing is this. Even though we fail, we know that Jesus restores us. But that doesn't excuse us to go and live and do as whatever we desire. And this is the main point here, is God, he's wanting to help his people be better than the people of the world. And this is what Jesus desires for us still today, that we are called to be different. We are called to be not like the world. We're in the world, but we're not of it. And we ask, and our prayer is, Lord, let us not be like everyone else. We should not allow the things of this world to dictate or enter in or change our thinking. Like we do see going on and has been going on in our world throughout the history of time. But God is always calling us back to himself. And that's the main point. That's what this is showing us, is where God's mercy still lies. And remember that God's mercy always lies in us. And these ordinances aren't there to ruin our fun. They're there to show and make us be different, and the people of Israel. And we still look at these ordinances to help guide us here, though we have Christ who continually forgives. But as we read these, we can see our shortcomings and our failures, don't we? But we also know his forgiveness doesn't excuse our shortcomings or our failures, but we are forgiven. Well, I pray that you have enjoyed this, and I look forward to next time. You have yourself a wonderful week, and remember, Jesus loves you, and so do I.